Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the GRC and Cybersecurity podcast. In today's episode of the Leaders of Risk and Cyber series, we have a very special guest, Stuart Powell, the CISO at the Government of Jersey. We discuss identity and access management and how you can improve this in your organisation. And then also we go back to one of the topics that everyone's wanting to know more about at the moment, which is AI and how it can affect and the risks on your organisation. Hi Stuart, can you introduce yourself and tell listeners a little bit about the company that you work for?
Stuart Powell. I'm the CISO for Government of Jersey, so not technically a company, we're a public sector. A small island, so depending on how broad your listenership is, a small island between the UK and France called Channel Islands. About 100,000 people living on an island, clinging to a rock, as we like to say. Yeah, and my remit basically covers all public sector, but we're a crown dependency, so that's public service, so the sort of council level stuff, as well as central government, as you imagine. Yeah. Anything in the UK central government, you've got the Parliament, you've got Treasury, you've got everything except defence, actually. So we're reliant on the UK for defence, kinetic defence, but actually our cyber defence is for us to manage. And that's where my role is at the pointy end, making sure that government Jersey systems are safe and secure, or as safe and secure as they can be in this world.
Fantastic. So before we go any further, one of the things we always like to ask is what do you get up to outside of work? So can you give a little bit of an overview of kind of what hobbies and things you're into at the moment?
I've got two I say young children, but they're not anymore. They're teenagers. So they're off to university soon. So as a family, we support the kids, as obviously everyone does. Personally, my main interests are getting out and about in the island. So I enjoy running, I enjoy cycling, but my main passion is surfing. So we're a small island, 9x5, but we've got a lovely big beach that's west facing. So practically most days in the year, there'll be something that's surfable. So you'll find me down there when it's world class. I will be at work. But I may be a little late.
Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about role? You said you're a CISO, but can you give an overview of how you got into security in your career so far?
So I've worked for the public sector most of my professional life. Started off in the service desk and then moved into sort of the more of the technical IT branch. And I moved into being infrastructure architecture. So that basically means designing, and at the time actually, designing and implementing and supporting big bits of infrastructure. So I was the lead on a few data center consolidation programs where we went from multiple server rooms or cupboards under stairs where you had compute to proper modern day data centers and aggregating all of our service lines into high density compute. So that's implementing blade infrastructure, hypervisors on those systems, shared storage, SANs, and all that stuff. So I've come from a very technical background. There came a period sort of 5-6 years ago when I sort of reached a ceiling in terms of progression and promotion, and I was as good as I could be architecturally and technologically, but from a career development, I kind of got to a point where I had to make some decisions. And as part of architecture, as part of the technical architecture role, is ensuring that what you're designing is secure. So that sort of naturally led me into looking at the bigger security challenges that an organisation faces. And I at the time, the organisation focused on security. There was an opening. I applied, and I sort of started the security journey for the Government of Jersey several years ago.
Amazing. And just because obviously public sector is probably very different to some of the things, can you talk about kind of the size and stage of the government's security programme?
Yeah, so it's been running now for a few years, and it covers all the standard typical domains that you'd expect. So sort of training and awareness, vulnerability management, your sort of SOC and SIEM, your sort of outsourced services where you've got technical experts looking at your state and responding on your behalf to bits and pieces. And identity and access management is probably a big area of focus where big complex organisations sometimes struggle quite a bit with managing identities through the organisation. So joiners, movers, leavers is a very simple concept, but in practice, when you consider the number of systems and applications and departments that all have to interact, it is actually quite a complex environment.
And so can we talk a little bit about kind of your reporting structure? So who do you report to, and also who are your direct reports? What does your team look like?
I report into the CIO, which is a fairly senior role in the organisation. That's not untypical for CISOs. I think the organisation's on a journey. I think most organisations are on a cyber journey of some sort. And where the CISO reports is actually a bit of a hot topic in the CISO community. I think what's more important isn't where you report into, but it's the access that you've got to decision makers. So the concept of matrix management and having specialist SMEs being able to have the ability to work independently of direct management is probably where we're more working. So long as I've got access to the right people at the right level of the organisation to take risk decisions to, then actually the line management and the line reporting becomes less important. Obviously, if you're in a very hierarchical organisation, then yeah, obviously the line management, the way you report into, is critical for your success to deliver. But I think we're a fairly forward-looking organisation in terms of how we manage people. So CIO is a good place to report. They understand the challenge, and a lot of the challenge is technical. But we also need to acknowledge that the role of the CISO is not a technical role. It's about cyber transformation. It's about risk. Primarily, it's about risk management. So as long as you've got access to risk owners, and you can access them as required, as needed, then actually as a CISO you can be effective.
Fantastic. So how are you currently spending your time? Like, what are the key priorities that you're focused on right at this point in time?
So we're coming off the back of a big investment. That's not to suggest where we started was poor. It's just the world has changed and organisations are waking up to the fact that they need to do a lot in cybersecurity. So having reached the end of a big transformation journey, I think the initial focus will be on embedding the controls that we've designed and delivered, and ensuring sustainment. So making sure that those controls are effective, they're measurable, and have longevity. Because we're public sector, we are under a lot of public scrutiny around public spend. So the money we spend on security needs to absolutely wash its face. So I need to be certain that the controls that we've designed and put in at taxpayers' money, at taxpayers' cost, are doing what they were designed to do. So my focus in the next, say 6 to 12 months will be ensuring that all of those things are fully embedded, and building the teams or supporting the teams around each of those service lines to ensure that they're well established on their continual improvement journey. So fine, they're managing what's there today, but they have to absolutely respond to the threats, the external threats. So a good example of that is our SOC, Security Operations Centre. They absolutely need to be aware of geopolitical tensions, new vulnerabilities, all the standard stuff. But we as a customer, as a client, need to drive that agenda. We can't expect our service suppliers to be doing that for us. We need to really take ownership of that and sort of manage the direction. I'm conscious I didn't mention my team previously. So I've actually got a relatively small team, but actually they're not the important part. The important part is the rest of the organisation and their service lines, all aligning to the strategic direction of the security. So, I've got a team of 4, but that's really just sort of governance and oversight piece. We've got security operations function, we've got security architecture function, then we've got business, departmental security related roles embedded across the business. So it's a family. My direct line reports aren't the ones keeping the lights on, but we work together. And back to the matrix management piece and the forward-looking way of managing people. I think it's a good model. We need to evolve it more, clearly, but everyone's in this position. We need to sprint to keep up as professionals in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it, bad guys probably always moving 2 steps ahead, and you just need to keep going with it. And look, it's a challenge, isn't it? And especially, like you said, you have to make sure all security spend is understood. You have to obviously go for it's not the same as a traditional company, whereas everything is taxpayers' money, and you have to validate risk reduction, I would assume, for why you're implementing new technology or new programs of work.
Yeah. Risk management is a focus for the organisation, and actually, cyber risk is just another business risk. It just happens to be a very important one. And if it's treated and managed the same way as the rest of the business risks, then actually, I'm doing my job correctly, and the board, if you like, or the senior leadership, then have confidence that their decision making is well founded and based on the important metrics that are being fed to them.
So we're going to go a bit more into a deep dive subject now. So when we spoke last time, you've kind of mentioned it already, the importance of getting identity and access management right. Do you mind explaining to the listeners kind of your view on this?
Yeah, so if we wind the clock back, say 10 years or so, maybe a bit further back, 15 years, security used to be all about the perimeter. You'd be an armadillo, if you like, so a hard exterior and a soft interior, and actually as long as you keep everyone out, then actually it doesn't matter if your interior is soft and weak and full of vulnerabilities. Generally you're safe. That was the world we used to live in. Obviously with cloud compute and various other types of mobile apps and all of the technology that we're so used to, that perimeter is now so porous that it isn't actually a perimeter anymore. We don't, firewalls, yes, do a job, but they also do a lot of other stuff to allow connections in and out, left, right, up and down. So identity becomes the last sort of logical perimeter that you can manage as a company. You're in charge of your people, you're in charge of the access that you give them, but you might not necessarily be in control of all of the technology that they use. So, for example, if you've got your main business line applications in a SaaS platform, then actually a lot of the infrastructure isn't your responsibility to manage and maintain. It's the suppliers. Yeah, and you can't necessarily govern and manage how the access to that data is managed on a technical level, but you can absolutely manage the access control part of it. So identity and access management becomes almost your most critical part as a company that you can still control in this current modern hybrid world of working. So getting a real firm grip on the people that are coming into your organization, how you onboard them, the access you give them, and how they operate whilst they're working for you, and how they move around within your organization. So obviously the bigger your organization, the more movers you have between service lines. And obviously if you're not governing and managing their access based on their role-based access has been talked about for decades, and it's a really hard thing to implement well. But if you do implement that well, and you've got all the processes behind it, then actually you can provide transparent assurance to all your stakeholders that the right person's got access to the right data at the right time. And actually, if you're operating like that, you make some of the real simple attack vectors impossible for an attacker to leverage. And then if you do that well, you can then focus on some of the other stuff, and you can start to move your cyber maturity journey up the scale.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was starting out as an auditor, some of the things listed around, obviously, making sure you've got correct role-based access control, segregation of duties, efficient joiners, movers, leavers. They're all things that we've talked about for years, but it was predominantly focused around the finance processes where people spend a lot of this time. Obviously, it needs to be done in all the other areas because people accrue access to things that, especially in IT and security, where they get access to a lot of things and they can accrue to get a lot of permissions and be obviously a very dangerous person to the organisation. So one of the things that you've spoke about there, so is there any practical steps you've taken or you'd recommend organisations to do to improve their identity access management processes?
I personally think it's largely a maturity thing. So I think if you've got if you work in a heavily or well-regulated industry, then you're almost compelled to operate a certain way. And that in turn fosters a sort of more mature way of approaching some of the risks. I think in some organisations that have grown more organically and are slightly behind the curve, then the processes aren't as robust. So I think the single best and most effective thing you can do is ensure that all of your managers have a well-documented responsibility for ensuring that their staff have access to the right things for their job. And so, you can do a command and control and mandate things from above and control things centrally, but actually it's your managers in the organisation that make things happen. And it's your managers who will be the first to throw service desk tickets in when their staff can't access the things they need to. But they also have to be really on the ball with actually when they don't need that access anymore or their roles change to actually start removing access. And it's the removal of access that never impacts anyone until it all goes wrong. So I think a strong culture, a strong security culture, and that comes back to training and awareness more than anything else, but also getting the processes embedded in the business where managers have to, on a periodic basis, recertify that their staff have the correct access. And by the correct access, it's not the access they need to do the job, but ensuring they haven't got the access that they shouldn't have to do, that they may have had from previous jobs. So again, it's a combination of well-deployed processes, a culture of awareness, and managers doing the right thing, not doing the thing that they need to get their job done, but actually holistically looking out for the rest of the business.
And is that a thing that you answer one of the questions I was going to ask there? Is that something that you do like on an ongoing basis? Or is it an annual review and you're just asking them to recertify the permissions or the roles that they have?
So one of the challenges we've come across is generally access is granted through Active Directory group membership in a Microsoft-centric organisation, which I think the majority of your listeners will be. Unless you've had some strong discipline around how you govern and manage the population and creation of those groups, it's going to be very difficult to work out by a group name what it actually gives access to. So one of the biggest challenges we've had is if you ask a manager to look at an AD group and validate that its membership is correct, they won't be able to answer that with confidence because they don't know where that group's been used in the organisation. It might have been used by another part of the organisation just because it's got the right number of people in it. And that decision would have been made on a certain date. Then time elapses and that group membership changes. And before you know it, the rationale for putting that group on that object is now no longer valid because the wrong people got wrong access. But it's a very difficult thing to surface to managers because managers are not IT people. We don't want them to be, we wouldn't expect them to be. So rolling back to how you provision access in the first instance and ensuring that you have good discipline in that will help build proper data. And when I say data, I mean the data around Active Directory and who's in what group and what groups give access to what resources. All of that really needs to be documented and put into registers, and those registers kept active and alive. When new business lines start up or new systems get put in, those registers are maintained by service owners. So again, it's a maturity thing. You have to assign ownership and responsibilities for various functions and processes. And if they're in place and people are following them and you can provide the assurance that they're being followed, then actually that builds a good baseline, a good foundation of data quality. And then you can start doing some of this automation so that you can get some of the recertification stuff in front of business users and it makes sense. There's no point putting stuff in front of business users that don't make sense because all they'll do is choose the path of least resistance and just go next. Yeah, it's all done. And actually you're not reducing risk by doing that. So it is difficult, but it's worth spending the time to get some of the foundational processes fixed. We talk about legacy in this industry quite a lot, and that every organization will have a legacy challenge in their Active Directory environment. It's just natural. Getting control around it is the key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because I've seen it so many times where even when we're doing simple integrations for Active Directory groups and you get all kinds of things back and you're looking at it going, there's thousands of these things and you're trying to assign things to it and you're like, no wonder a manager's struggling to understand it because you basically give them, here's this person has access to 15 groups and the groups have got all kinds of weird names, even linked to business units that no longer exist, right? In some cases, you've got no idea what it's doing. So let's move a little bit into something else. So we talk about some of your challenges, who you report to, but what do you think is really working at the moment? What's really making a difference in your organisation?
I think senior stakeholder understanding of the challenge. I think if you can get senior stakeholders understanding the challenge, then when you put forward ideas, proposals, concepts to solve some of those challenges, they can buy into it without having to reinvent that wheel, without having to have the conversation over and over. So I think what does work well is if you get senior decision makers, board members, to use sort of private sector language, engaged in the challenge and actively engaged, not engaged because they're nodding along because they don't understand. And that comes down to the maturity of the board as well. So if you've got a very mature board who understands risk management, they will listen to the subject matter experts in your organization. And you don't have to have the title of a CISO, you just have to have the responsibility for security. And that comes in many different flavors. But so long as you've got access and you can communicate in a clear way so that non-technical people understand the risks, and that's not easy, but if you can achieve that, then I think that's probably the single most effective thing to get in place, because from that, it unlocks so much. Just getting that top level buy-in, even if it's not about spending money and it's about making changes to the process. Process changes impact people's working day, and they will push back, and you won't be able to push these things bottom up. Whereas if you've got senior leadership engagement, they can support it top down. And that's the carrot and the stick piece. Carrots don't always work in the security world. In a perfect world, they would always be the way forward. People will do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and they get reward, be it personal reward or financial reward or whatever you can put in place. But at some point, you will have to impact people's day, and you will have to inject friction into the organisation, and that's the cultural piece. That's the bit where if we're all change agents and we can all adapt and adopt change and champion it, then actually that's really good. But sometimes in organisations that has to come from the top as a stick. And a blended approach of carrot and stick is the way forward for any. This is not specific to cyber. It's specific to the world and everything we do.
Yeah, I agree, because there's got to be a point of where you say, look, we recommend you do this, we recommend you do that, and then at some point it's like, look, we're telling you this is a really big problem. You need to understand this really. And then, but as you said, it's making sure they understand the business impact of it, because I think sometimes people get caught up in saying, oh, this SLA has not been met because of whatever patching, but then you say, okay, but that affects 5 critical services that we run. Then they go, oh, right, we need to do something with that. And I think it's always about saying to them what the impact of the business is, rather than just saying this technical thing over here has gone wrong, because a lot of the time they'll go, so what? They don't know. And what are the, probably more towards it being the government side is, what are the challenges that you see, obviously building an effective security function, working, I mean, there's 2 parts actually, I'll stop there. Being on an island, and then secondly, the that it's a government thing. What are the challenges you have with building a security function?
I'll address the government one first. So, yeah, a government, you'd like to think your government's all joined up, and all parties are talking to one another and they're all holistically pulling in the same direction. But the reality is that any government, in fact, any big corporate, is comprised of multiple smaller entities, all with their own mission statements and their own business drivers. And I think the biggest challenge is getting alignment on that, and that's where the board, again, back to my previous conversation, the board is the common factor there. They all report into a single thing that has the interests of the large organisation as their primary focus. And if you can get the board on board, engaged with the challenge at hand, then actually implementing changes, which is ultimately a security program is all about just making change for the better, and sustaining it, then actually that's the most effective thing you could do. And that is actually the biggest challenge to overcome. If you don't have access to the board, or you can't get access to the board through upward management, then you're very limited, very constrained as to what you can do in terms of a security program, in terms of security transformation or just improvement. Because ultimately it comes down to impacting business lines and introducing friction into the system. And if you haven't got support from above for that, it'll just fail. People will work around it. They'll push back, and it'll just become a fight. There's enough challenge fighting the bad actors. We don't really want to be fighting our internal structures and functions. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a jurisdiction, we want to retain talent on Ireland, because from supporting local economy, and it's just the right thing to do. We are challenged, but we've got a very small talent pool on the island. It's not to suggest there's no talent on the island; it's just small. And actually, when you're talking about roles such as cyber architects, you don't have many cyber architects just sort of twiddling their thumbs looking for new opportunities. Everyone that's capable in this space is already oversubscribed. So, recruitment and importantly retention is a huge challenge for us. And I don't think it's just us as an island, as a government. I think it's globally. I think any organisation trying to attract security talent into their organisation is challenged. And in my mind, there's two ways to fix it: offer massive salaries. There comes a limit where that's not sustainable, or generate an alternate pool for the work. So, working in the public sector is very different from private sector. And actually, if you're a civil servant, you're there because you want to do the right thing for society. You want to make a difference. I'm not suggesting that some of the private companies don't work that way, but it's absolutely a primary driver for a lot of civil servants is they're not there for the money. And because it's public purse, it's all scrutinised, and rightly so. We don't want to be spending a lot of money on resources when actually there's another way. So it kind of does challenge the building of capable teams. But one of the adages that I sort of live and breathe by is that I tend to focus on attitude and aptitude over knowledge and experience, because I think knowledge and experience can be taught and acquired, whereas attitude and aptitude, it's innate. It's part of who you are as a person. So if you've got somebody applying for a security role within a government and all they're interested is climbing the ladder and getting money, maybe they're not the right fit for my team. If you've got somebody in that's passionate about the subject and wants to learn more, and they're hungry to learn, then actually that in and of itself is an attribute that I would absolutely be open to over qualifications coming out your ears. Because you could have someone very studious that's got no ambition, no drive, no get up and go. And actually, when you're working under pressure and you've got a lot to do, you need somebody to be self-starting and get up and go. So and again, I don't think these things are specific to our organisation. I think I'm seeing this globally. I think we've got some other constraints maybe, but I think we've also got some other levers that we can pull on as a government that maybe private sectors don't.
Yeah, and you kind of started to answer the next question, but let's jump to that because it kind of makes a lot of sense. So talk me through what you think a great information security professional, what are the skills you look for?
So I think one of the biggest attributes I look for is integrity. Obviously, that's integrity on its own doesn't make you a good professional, but it makes you a trustworthy professional. And I think in this day and age, with the complexity of the environments, we have to trust our people. We can't command and control from above. We can't run it like a military organisation. There just isn't the bandwidth to have that amount of management overhead. So we have to trust our people. They have to be willing to learn and operate outside of comfort zones. I listen to a number of podcasts, but one of the guys I listen to regularly he has this phrase, which is everything you know about IT and security is obsolete within 18 months. So we as professionals have to keep up, and the industry has to sprint to keep up with changes. And I think it's not just changes in technology, but it's changes in the way our threat actors use that technology. So the people have to be adaptable, willing to be challenged, embrace the challenge. I'm not sure if I answered that question directly, but that's the sort of team that I'm looking for.
No, that's fine. And then what are your biggest areas of concern for 2023?
I mean, ChatGPT is all over the place. AI seems to be the buzzword of the week, year, decade. I genuinely think it's going to be transformative globally, not just in security, but I think as a species, I think we're about to witness a step change in what we can do with technology. So with opportunity comes risk. So I think that's going to be a focal point for, and I wouldn't say it's just security. I think that's a focal point for industry at large. So I think there's going to be a lot of focus on, large language models, OpenAI, implementation of what they're doing with ChatGPT. In my mind, there's a couple of angles to that. So one is use of these technologies, use of the open technologies, and people's willingness to engage with them because they're so easy to get results. I think there's a huge risk of corporate and personal data being put into these platforms, and I don't think we're clear on what happens with that data. So the one thing I would caution is don't put corporate sensitive information or personal sensitive information, stuff that you would ordinarily protect, into these platforms to get your answer out, whatever that might be. So that's just a word of warning. It sounds simple, but these things are very easy to be tempted into asking more and more questions of them. And then on the sort of broader piece is that the use of AI and machine learning technology is here. We've got the technology you buy today off the shelf has AI and machine learning built into it. I say AI is a strong term, but machine learning for certain. So I think it's understanding how we can leverage these things better. But actually, it comes back to a more fundamental principle of data management. So a lot of organizations have a lot of information and data in their environments. And actually, ultimately, that's what we're protecting. As professionals, a cyber criminal doesn't want to access your servers. They want to access the data. Yes, they might put some ransomware on a server, but actually what they're doing is denying you access to the data. If it was easier spinning up another server tomorrow, we'd all not worry about ransomware because the recovery is straightforward. It's the data because that's proprietary. That's yours as a company. So coming back to what I reckon is going to be the focus next, or the worry bead for the next couple of years, I think it's what machine learning does. And for those organizations that are embracing it, if they haven't got good quality data and processes behind it, informing these algorithms and these models, then there is a danger that what comes out of them doesn't have the integrity it needs to have. So I think there'll be a lot of people putting a lot of hope and trust into these platforms, whereas actually it's the data that they're putting their trust in. And if that's not in a good shape to start with, I think there's a danger there. So I think there's going to be a data-centric focus across the security industry in the next 2-3 years. I think if you asked me this question 3-4 years ago, it would have been around identity. We've spoken about identity. I think data is now the next layer that needs some real effort to resolve.
Yeah, we had a guest on very recently, Sam Bisbee, and we spoke in detail about this, and it was kind of like, look, AI is here. You have to accept it's there, but you have to inform people the risks. And exactly what you said there is, don't put anything that you wouldn't want in the public domain on it, because it's not. I don't think anyone's entirely clear what's been done with it. I think there's a lot of uses of it. I'm seeing a lot of people using it in marketing and things for externally things. I've also seen product managers use it for, analyzing big data sets. So actually, I've seen it go and looking at review websites was one, and it can summarize review websites for you. But you've got to know what you're looking at and be able to challenge it. I think you can't, as you were saying, take it as gold and assume what it gives you back is correct. You have to be able to analyze it and leverage that data. So we're going to finish with what often is the hardest question. So if you had one wish in security to fix, what would it be?
Tricky, because there are many, and they're all probably equally as weighty. I would say have every employee in the organization know the mission and be present in their thoughts around security and actually take security seriously on an individual basis and have that as part of their fabric in everything they do. So every action, every decision they make, have security baked in. And not from a sort of dogmatic point of view, but from a cultural point of view, understand that everybody has a role to play in the organization. And actually, if everybody operated like that, then everything else becomes so much easier. Any suggestions around process change, any kind of reactive response, incident management, all becomes easier because people engage with the process and they understand their role in it. So if there was a magic wand, it would be to get everyone in the organization aligned around security. It's a tall ask. It's probably an impossibility and a pipe dream. But, you asked the question.
So thanks, Stuart, for your time. Really appreciate it. If our listeners want to hear more from you, get to reach out to you, is there anywhere that they can do that?
Well, like most of us, I've got a presence on LinkedIn, so you can connect to me there. I generally am quite fussy about who I connect with, but if you're in the industry and you're genuinely interested, then connect and introduce yourself, and I will respond.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
That's great. Thank you.